Hi, I'm Dr. Cameron Smith from Portland State University, where I'm an archaeologist. And our Wapato Valley Archaeology project has been coming out here since 1991. We didn't even know where the site was, where the village site was, and so we were exploring these cottonwood forests over here. And eventually we found the site and we excavated over a number of years, brought home over 100,000 objects, artifacts, pieces of bone and antler, tools, remains of things that they were eating. And then we also brought back thousands of photos and documentation of the architecture of the Plankhouse village. And this is, of course, a reconstruction of one of the village structures. Now imagine 12 or 14 of these. And all the smoke and heat and dogs running around and kids playing and a very lively village. And so just coming to this one structure, you get a sense of that. But you have to imagine a whole series of these as a functioning village. Well, we're just now entering Long Meadow. And as you can see, it's a long meadow, and it runs north and south here. And our excavation units were focused on the Cathlapotle Village, which is inside the stand of trees. But we did put units out here as well. And we discovered there was very little activity. And so there was an extreme focus, for example, on the village site and then on certain places around the landscape. At the meadow, not a whole lot of activity. So we're at the north end now, or approaching it, of Long Meadow. At the very end there, you can see a stand of trees. That covers up G Creek, which is a nice little freshwater creek that goes out into the Columbia River. Over here, these are cottonwood trees that would only have come up in the last 200 years. And so this would actually have been a straight shot to the river on that side with the village over there. And then you would cross this meadow. And if you're looking for other resources, for example, ducks, and all kinds of things that are in these little wetlands with a little bit rockier land and it's a little bit higher, you would have gone over towards here. And this is a ridge of original trees, a lot of them. And so beyond that, there are oaks. And so you have this patchy environment. There's a big patch of resources there. And then here, it's very clear, there's almost nothing. And then suddenly there's the river itself with the village. We've cut our way through the cottonwood jungle, temperate rainforest, and now we're moving towards the house depressions. And we've laid out where one of our excavation trenches was with that white rope. And what you can see, I'm going to walk over there now. What you're going to see is that I'm going to go down into a depression. That's one of the house depressions. So one of the walls of the house was roughly here. Then down in the depression was where the hearths are and all the activity of the houses with smoke and fire and people running around, kids, dogs. That would have all been there in the center. And then where it rises again, that would have been the other wall of the house. We're now inside one of the house depressions, and we've just cleared a small part of this. The house would have been 100 feet long, and there were up to 10 or 12 of these structures. And it would have gone all the way up there, it's gone all the way this way. It's a long, narrow plank house. And I'm down in the center of it here, and with this rope, you see the recreation of one of our excavations. And you start with this kind of a site. We really began with a big trench that cut one of the houses right down the middle. And that's so that we could see the depth of it and see the site, what's called the formation processes. Was it floods that brought everything in here? Was it an intact site? Has it been disturbed? You can't understand that unless you put this long trench in and look at the formation processes, the layers of different sediment. And what we discovered is that the site was very intact. Nothing had come along and terribly disturbed it. And so it was then, okay, we've got a good handle on that based on the trench. Now let's start opening up excavation units in other parts of the houses. Again, our rope is laid out here representing one of our excavation trenches. And each 4 meters, or roughly 15 feet, was excavated by two students. And one person typically would be down inside excavating, and the other person is sitting at the edge really doing the paperwork. A lot of recording, paperwork, photography, carefully documenting everything that we encountered as we're excavating. And the rule of thumb is generally when you're in the unit excavating, you want to be out doing the paperwork. And when you're doing the paperwork, you kind of want to be in there doing the excavation. But you can see here, there's a very rich soil, very dark. And it is not very deep below here that you would start to find artifacts. The archaeology begins very close to the surface here. So now we're in the high status area of one of these houses where the highly ranked royal family essentially would have lived. And people often ask, what do we find here? And you find a lot of the objects people used in daily life. So they would be under the floorboards in their storage areas. There would have been fishing net equipment, fishing nets and weights, canoeing equipment, tools for making all kinds of other tools, woodworking tools, all sorts of tools, and that would have all been stored, right where people were living. So we excavated in some of those areas. We also put excavation units way outside the houses, for example, in the midden or the garbage pile, and that tells us, just like any detective goes through your garbage to find out what you're doing. We went through the midden area, and you could see layer after layer over centuries the kind of garbage they were throwing out, and that tells us what they were eating. There were plant remains, animal remains, shellfish, all kinds of things were out in the garbage pile, and that helps us to reconstruct their diet. The Wapato Valley Archaeology Project was set up in 1991 to organize the cooperation of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the Chinookan people, and the Portland State University Department of Anthropology to investigate the world of the Chinookans who lived in the region that we now call the Ridgefield National Wildlife Refuge.
Speaking of homes, the Cathlapotle Plankhouse is a treasure of our refuge and a beacon of the understanding of those first peoples who lived in our area. And we're very lucky to have Juliet to show us the wonder of this ancient home, the Cathlapotle Plankhouse.
Hi, my name is Juliet Mcgraw. I'm the Cultural and Community Education Director for the Friends of the Ridgefield National Wildlife Refuge, and I am pleased to welcome you to the Cathlapotle Plankhouse. Welcome to BirdFest and Bluegrass 2020 Home Edition.
One of the things that I like to first draw attention to when visitors come to visit the Cathlapotle Plankhouse is our beautiful post that runs through the length of the house. It's hard to tell in this light, but this entire beam is coated in red paint, and it begins at the Elite Status Inn, and the carving over the Tyee's head runs over both hearths, the wealth post, the greeting post, and out right over the top of our entrance. This is the outside mural of our Tyee. Today I'm going to focus mostly on things you can see outside of the house. Unfortunately, we don't know when the Plankhouse will be open again to visitors, but we hope soon. So today I will take you on a few points that you can still enjoy when you're outside of the house. First thing, I'm going to come over and talk to you about the trees that made this house. You can see right here that it is a completely center of a tree. This is one of the great cedars, the western red cedar, that was given over to create this house. You can also see along the walls, they are big, flat pieces, and those flat pieces are called planks. Much like you would think of planing wood, the cedar can be split straight down a good solid grain and make planks, and that's how we created the walls for this house. That's how the walls in the traditional village of the Cathlapotle Village, that is just that direction over the wetlands, and many of the plank houses in this area. It's one of the reasons why we distinguish between a plank house and a longhouse, because a longhouse can describe any of one of these indigenous living styles, but our plank houses is special because they're made of western red cedar that planks out like this. So, another thing that I want to share with you today is the artwork. You can see in the front that we have a beautiful mural. It was designed by Tony Johnson, who is the standing chair of the Chinook Indian Nation, and it was executed by his assistant, Adam McIsaacs. The plank house is roughly 15, 16 years old, so you can see how well the painting has held up. I first directed your attention to the red beam across the top. So in our communities, those of us who are indigenous, red is a very important color. It reminds us of our ancestors. It's where we can receive knowledge. For the Chinook and also many Pacific Northwest peoples, red represents the senses that maybe you can't always interact with, like touching and tasting and things like that. It's more where are you getting your hearing from and listening to those who've gone beyond. One of the things we like to stress at the Cathlapotle Plankhouse is that this plankhouse, among many other plankhouses in the region, are people. They should be accorded with that kind of respect. It's considered an elder in our community and a person in the Chinook Indian Nation. So we need to make sure that we're always treating the house with respect when we enter and exit. So what about the meaning of these murals? Well, what would happen in these communities, the Cathlapotle Village was 12 to 14 houses large. Each one of these houses would have had a mural talking about who did what inside, and is fitting because Sam Robinson and Tony Johnson, the vice chair and chair of the Chinook Indian Nation respectively, are both artists. And so what we learn about this is that there's artists that are really prevalent in this community. But how do I know that, and how can I share that with you? So I want to take your attention to the top two colors that are making these great chevrons over the head of our tyee. The yellow stands for many things, but also just a lot of power. However, the only way to get this beautiful yellow color would have been if you knew how to collect red ochre, cook it at the right temperature, and make it transfer into a yellow paint. And if you did this incorrectly, you didn't get any paint at all. You didn't get red paint, you didn't get yellow paint, you didn't even get crumbly brown paint that was good because you had burned the rock. So it was specialized knowledge that you could put towards your community and artistic goods. Artistic goods are important for spiritual purposes, but also you have to remember Chinook and people of the lower Columbia River were excellent traders. That's how they got the ochre to cook and change into yellow, but it's also how they convinced people to trade them their ochre. There aren't a huge amount of that naturally occurring sandstone in our area. However, one of the other things you'll see is this blue. It's called Chinook blue. One of the things that's most amazing about it, it only really comes in rare form. You have to have good chalky kale and clay mineral deposits, and you have to have the right kind of decaying matter that will solidify and make that color blue. I think it's fascinating that a color, even this day, you can see that it's named after that. It's a wonderful chalky slate blue. Next time you visit the house, you'll be able to see that. I'm gonna move down to the tyee's face. You can see that part of the face is red, just like my jacket, just like the post above, and part of the face is cedar. One of the reasons why is because cedar is a coloring agent. It's not accidentally left open. We wanna honor the trees that gave their life to bring this house into existence, those that made up the planks, the beams, and the roof. So we intentionally leave that blank to honor the cedar. And the red, again, we're pulling on power from our ancestors and from the community. So, and the last thing, and the body of our Chinookan people, that's going to be really interesting when you get to go into the museums and you get to see some amazing examples of Pacific Northwest art, especially that open panel, that flat panel design that's so popular with facial styles. Well, Chinookan art is a little more angular, it's a little more different. 3s and 5s are heavily apparent, but you're always going to see these ribs. These ribs are one of the most amazing things about this art style because it does not matter whether you are seeing an animal, a spirit, a human, or a combination thereof, you're always going to get these magnificent ribs to let you know that this is a part of Chinookan lifestyle. This also harkens to their stories and their traditions and their music and their songs. And it's just a really nice thing to see here. A lot of people sometimes wonder, where's the totem pole? And while totem poles are another wonderful, magnificent use of Pacific Northwest art peoples, and the totem poles bring a lot of culture to our region, that's not the culture that's right in this immediate area, so we don't have any of those. However, the last thing I want to see is that you can see on either side there are dog heads, and there's red coming from those mouths. One of the things that's super important to know about that is there were many dogs that were buried in the Cathlapotle Village, and in Salish and Chinookan things, it is really, really important that you honor the dogs that were here. So you can see that are dogs that are greeting people, and you can see everything that you might want to know at first glance about the people inside.
Welcome to the Plankhouse. If you have never been here before, it is traditional to go in backwards to show respect. You should probably brace yourself against the opening so you don't fall backwards. Put one foot here and be careful, there's a ledge back here. And then turn around immediately so you don't fall down the stairs.
So much history and a beautiful way to look at an ancestral home. It just makes me grateful for those people who shaped and tended this beautiful land in which we now have a privilege to live and benefit from their stewardship. Thank you again, Juliet.